Hello, everybody. It's Lenny Murphy with another edition of the CEO series, and I'm glad to have you taking time out of your day to spend it with myself and my guest. This is one I've really been looking forward to. So my guest today is Marc Ryan, who is the CEO of Dark Matter Consulting, and also has been around the industry for a very long time, and he'll explain that. But before we even get there, Mark and I have been going back and forth on a variety of topics for a while, and we're just going to have fun. This is the futurist episode. We're going to talk about all types of stuff that I think will be interesting. And after Mark introduces himself, I think you'll understand exactly why we're going to go in that direction. So, Mark, now with that setup for everybody, tell us your origin story, and then we'll dive into the fun stuff.
Sure. So my origin story goes back to Canada. I'm Canadian, and I did a survey in college for the National Ballet of Canada and was looking for a summer job and ended up applying to a small consultancy in Toronto called Miller Brown, which was a recent acquisition in the heyday of acquisitions that they were doing. And it was a receptionist job. So, I always take pride in the fact that my first job in the industry was as a receptionist, picking up the phone, answering the phone. And as, was the case at the time, they would make everybody, on the team had to do something. And so I would be doing acetates, slides, things like that. And, I kind of knew my way around computers, and that kind of made me stand out in that regard. Moved into part-time work after the initial summer job. And then I ended up taking a full-time role there. One of the things I really liked about that job, and I think one of the things that set me up in sort of the way I approached my career, was the guy I worked for was a behavioral psychologist. And so he loved to do everything. Like, he was the biggest experimenter on the planet. We were testing, this in the 90s, we were testing eye tracking software, all kinds of really wacky stuff. And he let me go get a modem, my first connection to the internet at work, 2800 baud modem, this big wire running over my cubicle to my desk. And that modem basically ended up sort of, vaulting me into the internet in a big way, because at the time in the 1996, the internet had sort of started coming up, and we had launched Miller Brown Interactive, a online measurement firm to measure the effect of online advertising. It was in Silicon Valley. Actually, it was in the city of San Francisco, south of Market, and we were doing online advertising measurement. And it was this thing that was in the distance. We had acquired a team out of Hotwired, which had rolled out the first ad online, like a 50% click rate back in those days. And we were testing these things. And what happened was the team that was working at Hotwired decided, from the Hotwired team, most of the people who were actually doing the day-to-day research just up and left. They wanted to go do their own startup. It was, heyday of the internet. And I got a call from the guy who was running the division at the time, and he said, "Hey, you're the only one I've really met that has a modem that knows anything about the internet. Do you want to come down to San Francisco and work on this internet thing?" Which is what I did. And that sort of cascaded me into the world of digital, the world of the internet. We were testing all of the online ad formats as they came out. The first video ads we tested wacky things like cursors that would change into Ronald McDonald fingers and things like that to help sort of drive brand online. And it was really a fun time. That vaulted me into a variety of startups. I ended up working and moving from what you would consider more of like the marketing research side into the media research side. And I worked for a number of startups, which went through a variety of different hands in terms of ownership. But in essence, Jupiter Media Metrics, which was the big 800-pound gorilla of online media measurement in the late 90s. The internet blew up in 2000s. That entity got broken up, and as part of that breakup, I ended up at a company called Net Ratings. Net Ratings was the online measurement leader of the time, at the day. And I worked there for a number of years. And that's really what kind of started getting me into product development, from more of like the analytics, research, analysis side of the business. And that was a lot of fun because, we got to do really cool things like try to invent new forms of research, new ways of approaching the market. That resulted in a acquisition by Nielsen, and I ended up in the Nielsen company. At the time, Nielsen was owned by private equity, so it was interesting days. We had a lot of fun building new technology, working on measurement approaches and methodologies. And then a friend of mine called up and said, "Hey, I want you to come to this startup." And I went to a private equity-backed startup that was in the marketing research space called Insight Express. I worked there for a number of years as the chief research officer and migrated into a co-CEO role, and where we successfully exited the business to Kantar. So full circle from receptionist at the front desk,
Miller Brown, back to Kantar,
all the way back to selling to Kantar, and that was a while ago. And I spent 9 years at Kantar in a variety of different roles. I worked on helping build the media measurement, the brand measurement side of the business. I worked in the panel side. I relaunched the panel that they have there, the Kantar Profiles panel. I went to a chief data officer role, and then after that, I left and went to an enterprise software startup. And I would say that's probably one of the most interesting things I did, in the last 10 years or so. I've done a lot of marketing research. I know insights, but then doing decision science at a relatively high tech startup that was running like petabytes worth of data real time for customers was a real difference maker. And I learned a lot there. Took that into a role at YouGov, worked there in a product role. And since then, I've been doing my own thing. I have my own consultancy, Dark Matter Solutions, and that's what I do today. I work with a variety of companies and startups, and a lot of the types of firms, Lenny, I know that you also take a lot of interest in, are the ones that I tend to bump into day in, day out.
That's great. You brought up talking about the early days. I remember going on CompuServe in 1997. And
it was a time when WPP, who owned Kantar, and Miller Brown, wanted to make a real big play on the internet. They knew that this was going to be important. Like, in the 90s, when you wanted to do internet advertising, there was a guy down the hall, who had his, hair in a ponytail and, sit there in a dark room with a hoodie on. And that was who you went to. And they wanted to try to mainstream that a little bit. And so Eric Salama, who ended up being the CEO of Kantar, but previously to that was in a chief strategy officer role at WPP, came to Silicon Valley, and we all got piled in a car, or people there from the different agencies as well, and went down to visit Excite at Home. And for those who don't know what Excite at Home was, that was one of the largest internet providers on the planet at the time, and they had their own website and portal and what have you, and had the big NASA room with all the screens on the wall showing the internet connection speeds and what have you, back in the heyday.
Yeah. Well, fun times. And actually, so that's interesting. There's our framing system for this conversation, right? Because you obviously have been in the thick of things from, I was just a lowly user, right? You were kind of pioneering what the digital world would look like, or at least trying to understand it and measure it from the get-go. And since you left YouGov and hung out your own shingle, I subscribe to your Substack. Which, by the way, folks, if you don't, we'll make sure to kind of put a link in there. But you should subscribe to Marc's Substack or follow him on LinkedIn because he posts there as well. But I've loved the level of thinking that you've been putting out there about. Well, you tell me whether you agree with this. Here's my take.
Sure,
when thinking about this is, you've come out and said the world's changing. Period. Not even changing. It has changed. It has fundamentally shifted already. So, and we have a pretty clear view of trajectory over the short period of time. Although the longer we go out, the less clear that is. But the short period trajectory is driven by a massive transformation at all levels of this industry, driven by the value of data, but how we use it, how we acquire it, how we process it, the things that we do with the outputs of that have massive implications for the business models of the insight space overall, and are utterly disruptive. And we can bitch about it and moan about it and say, wait, but no.
Yeah.
And it makes no difference whatsoever. The world has simply, it is an accelerating pace of change. And I think you tackle those topics on a regular basis, not in any hyperbolic way, but simply very thoughtful. Let's break it down and look and think about it through your experience of kind of riding this digital train for a long time in very large organizations. So that is my take. Did I get it right? Or
absolutely. I mean, the world, I think you said it right. I mean, the world has changed, right? I just don't think it's come home to roost yet for a lot of folks. And one of the things, everybody learns over time, particularly when you try to affect change, is that change does take time, right?
Mhm.
And even when changes happen, you really can't recognize the change until you look backwards, right? There's something about meaningful change that's only visible in a rearview mirror. And I think one of the things is we're living through a very interesting time today where the new technologies that we're seeing come out there, particularly speaking to topics like AI, they're targeted at data, right? Fundamentally, when you look at what they're part of the knowledge economy, right? What is insights? But it's the sort of foundational piece of the knowledge economy. Like you go back 60, 70 years when you wanted to understand what was going on with consumers, you went to the research department. That they knew everything. They had access to all the data. And over time, that department's been fragmented into different subsections and different parts and different functionalities within the business. And here comes something new that's just going to tackle that and try to take little pieces off the bone, so to speak, of what the values that you get from those parts of the industry.
Yeah, I know from over the years of our conversations, I think that you would agree with this, that I started talking about the idea of insights and the data that we collect as just being a spoke on a wheel, feed into a central hub. And around the time of big data, right? That was the term. Not recognizing what was missing was a system to synthesize that information, unlock more value. That's what AI does. Right? Yeah. So, we are now a feed, and we were moving in that direction for a long time. But the exponential increase, and I do think it's exponential. I don't think that it is moving faster than anything that I have ever observed. Of adoption of those technologies that don't just create efficiencies, but unlock new possibilities and potential for value creation across the entire stakeholder chain, right? From individual users or individual practitioners to large organizations, is just mind-boggling.
I think in general, people just have a hard time conceptualizing the rate of change, right? I think the analogy maybe just works best is most people are familiar with the concept of Moore's Law, which existed for decades, which is like every year, well, it's actually every 21 months or so, somewhere between 16 and 20, I don't know the exact number, but just under 2 years, the processing power of computers doubles, right? So that's why, we went from, the Motorola handspring in the early 2000s to iPhones today, which are like 1 million times more powerful than what you would have had just 10, 15 years ago. And that Moore's Law has been true for a long time. If you think of it like the equivalent in terms of like AI and the Moore's Law for AI, the research that they've done points to the number being somewhere between 3 and 7 months of a doubling.
I was thinking about 6 months was what I was thinking. Yeah,
exactly. And I think that the interesting thing about that is we know that. And once again, it's just looking backwards. Like if you played with any of these AI systems, ChatGPT, when it first came out, like in the late 2002, at least when it started to go viral in late 2022 or in early 2023.
About this time.
But like it is now, infinitely better. We can see that. You can recognize that in the responses you get, and that's 2 years. And so just think about it in that context. I think the new thing that people are talking about is they've stopped talking about like the processing power or the amount of effort and the amount of power of these models. They're not talking about like how long they can work before losing context or failing to be able to keep a task going. And that is also doubling every 6 or 7 months. So, not only are they getting smarter, but they're also being able to do more longer. And that's been the challenge with like agentic and stuff so far. It's just been that, AI slop or context rot and things like this, where models just kind of run out of memory or just can't, keep a process going long enough without messing things up.
Yeah.
That's something that obviously showed up and the industry's been tackling. I mean, these are industries that have got billions upon billions upon billions of dollars in investment. Right?
Yep.
And so to expect them to not address these things would be naive.
Yeah. Yes, in my own personal experience, I've run into a token limit once. And rightfully so. It's one really, really, really long, intense, chain on my current favorite perplexity. But that was it, right? Everything and everything since then, there has never been any challenge that I've run into from that standpoint of it's actually, I see the memory, not just memory, but I see it adapting on an ongoing basis to my preferences. It anticipates the type of things that I use it for, and not in a limiting way, but actually in an expansive way. Which is just really interesting. With the point being that, like you, I am a consultant, so that is how I feed my family. My limiting factor is my time, so that's it. So I'm able to produce more. That's probably higher quality, honestly, faster. That increases my bandwidth and allows me to take on more work and do more things than I could before. So that is a superpower. It is an amplifier for me. And that's unexpected. Going into a year ago, my thought was that it would limit or devalue me. So, right.
That's the one topic I'm going to pick up next, at least on my Substack. But it's just the concept of like, what does all this mean for different cohorts of individuals?
Yeah. Because where's the value? Isn't that also
where's the value, right? The research came out of Stanford that said that like if a job can be completely replaced with AI, it's already showing to be that's happening. But new graduates are still being hired, right? If you have a job that is augmented by AI as a new graduate, you can come in. Those jobs are still there and they're still available. They're not declining. And the research that they did suggested one thing, which is that like if you're a veteran of a particular industry, you are well positioned to be to deep dive into the AI world because AI is going to augment you. It's kind of like you were just saying, like AI as an augmenter for veterans is just a huge win, and it's getting easier to augment people even if they don't know a lot about AI. Right? It's very easy to go in and ask those questions, and you see folks like OpenAI now going out and hiring people who don't have AI skills, but they're just like, hey, a lot about investment banking, a lot about healthcare. Like, they want the veteran talent to come in. I think from a talent perspective, that's great for the veterans because they can bring all that sunk knowledge that they've got in an industry or a particular area to the table, and AI helps make that better. I think the second most valuable cohort is going to be the new graduates, and I think this is the other thing that most people assume that's the job. Those are the jobs that are all going to be eliminated. But I think if the newer people, they bring something to the table that AI doesn't have yet, which is like open minds, right? When you think about people like little kids will solve problems that adults can never solve because they just look at it through the lens completely unreserved of bias, and they can just look at a problem and think of a different way to solve it. And that's what new employees bring to the table is they think differently. They're not biased by everything you've been doing for the last 20 years, right? So when you think about how a business gets ossified into its processes and stuff like that, like bringing in new hires from the colleges and what have you, they're going to bring a new way of thinking to the table, and I think that's still going to be valuable in the future. The folks, ironically, that need to figure out like how to sort of solidify their career path the most, if you think about jobs and what have you, are the people who are in the middle. Because the people in the middle have had that time to ossify, but they're like, no, this is how things are done. This is what my customers want.
Right.
They can certainly augment what they want with AI, but if you're going to say, well, do I want a Lenny who's been doing this for 25, 30 years, who, augmented by AI, or do I want someone who's been doing it for 10 years augmented by AI? It's like, well, I'll take the more experienced person if I can get it, or I want a different way of thinking. So I think, interestingly, I think there's a sort of a difference shaping up in what you would have thought was like, career stability that comes out of this. Obviously we'll have to see what happens over time, but it is an interesting thing we're seeing where, like, open perspectives, new ways of looking at things are valued, because the old way of looking at things is already well understood by AI systems. And the only thing you can augment it with are what the veterans really know. It's that institutional, that skill knowledge that they've developed over decades.
Well, at least you and I both hope that's the case.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But I think that you're right. What I've, like you, I work with a lot of early stage companies, but also some more established companies, and with the early stage companies, obviously this is intuitive for them, so it's natural to they're going to utilize technology to automate any process that can be automated and create those efficiencies of scale, and that is their advantage: speed and agility, and et cetera from that standpoint. Now, the established companies, we get into business model challenges, right? They have a difficult time adapting to that change, because so much of that middle layer of the business is process, and it is human driven process, either process conducting the process, facilitating the process, or managing the process. This is the way we do things, which certainly high quality, et cetera, no question about that, but it doesn't deliver value. Is simply a necessary component to get to the value creation, and that is a hard chasm, intellectually, emotionally, and business wise, to navigate through that. I vividly remember a few months ago having a conversation with the CEO of one of the largest companies in the world, that research companies. How do you communicate to your shareholders, right? That, look, we're at X dollars revenue now. Here's what's going to happen over the course of the next 18 months. That revenue is going to decline because we simply cannot charge as much for these things, because clients know we don't have people doing them, right? So so it's going to come down, although our profitability is going to increase dramatically, because we're not paying the people to do those things. And there's this huge middle layer of process that is just going to go away. But it's difficult. How do you have that conversation with investors, with internal stakeholders, hell, even your employees? I don't envy anyone who is running a established research company today in trying to navigate those things as a CEO.
And I think it's a challenging one. I do think it will take longer than we expect for some of those companies to sort of, there'll be the transformation there. But the other challenge is that, some of the big research companies, they're really good at doing, face-to-face interviews in, one of the 10, 11 different dialects in India,
Right.
in rural areas of the country, or in Indonesia. Like, there's some markets where you're still operating in a very manual, hard to find group of populations.
Sure.
And so that will stick around. But to your point, I think everybody's going to be looking for ways to, like, agentically rebuild their backends. I think one of the things that's a little bit unfortunate that hasn't happened yet, at least I haven't seen it happen yet, is like, when you get into sort of a senior or like a C-level role within a business, you learn very quickly that investors value businesses, along a spectrum. You're either a services business, you're a data business, or you're a technology business. Technology businesses are the most valuable, like think Google, right? Data businesses, yes, they're valuable, but that takes a little bit more work. And the services businesses, they turn and cough. They just don't want to have anything to do with it,
Right.
because they're really hard to deliver value against. And I think what you're speaking to, their points to, like, well, there's actually a AI sort of opens door to a fourth model, which is a service-led business, but an AI automated backend, which is kind of like a hybrid between services, which there's a lot of industries that are services.
Yeah.
But if you can take out the cost of operation, the reason services are so devalued is because if you want to grow the business, you got to hire more people. Right? If I want to deliver more market research, I got to hire a larger operations team. If I want to do more, of anything that's service related, I got to hire more people to make that work. And that's one of the reasons why they're not valued very highly versus technology, where I just get more people to buy my technology. I build it once.
Right.
And I do see that there will be this thing emerging where they actually can create more valuable service-oriented businesses that can lean on an automated agentic type backend to deliver that value. But to your point, it's kind of like, how do you describe that to investors? Because that's not necessarily a business model that's well understood or even proven yet to be successful by anyone. But the idea is that hey, we might not sell as much revenue-wise, but we're certainly going to deliver massive profitability, and the value on the business should be higher. The multiple you get on that profit should be higher than what you would as just a plain services business.
There's I can't remember the name of them. They're a consultancy, and recently over the past couple months, they've been leaning into the idea, and they've coined the term services software, which fundamentally is what we're talking about, right? A thin layer of service and expertise with a shit ton of AI to create scale and efficiency. And I think that's right. To your point, though, I would argue that even some of the valuable companies that we have seen recently scale, that's acquired by Meta, fundamentally, any of the AI training set companies are taking humans, taking their information, and delivering that, which fundamentally they're gig networks, right? They are scaling service. This service is just kind of a microservice type of model. But yeah, we see those companies getting billion-dollar valuations. I look at that and think that there is a path for insights businesses, especially in kind of the panel side of things, real panel, not necessarily programmatic, to get investors to see, look, we are actually in the business of extracting human information and experience and delivering that at scale to drive greater AI efficiency. And that can be a game changer for many companies in the industry if we're part of that tech stack. If we start thinking of ourselves as part of an ecosystem and a stack that is unlocking more value from this core asset, which fundamentally is just information overall. But again, making that transformation for established businesses that have very specific models and pricing strategies, et cetera, is going to be a challenge. They can conceptualize it to make the leap.
Yeah, it's funny. I made an analogy a number of years ago. I called market research the Patagonian toothfish of the industries, and it's an analogy. It goes to the fact that Patagonian toothfish, most people would think of that and I think that sounds like a disgusting fish. I don't want to eat that, but it's actually a fish that was discovered by a chef down in Chile, and he's like, Patagonian toothfish. He cooked it up. He's like, this is really tasty. Can you start importing this to New York? And he started selling in his restaurant as Chilean sea bass at $30-40 a pound, which is now considered a very high, highly valued premium fish. It's market research is something that's highly valued. It's premium, but people don't like the name, right? It's something about that, and I think that's been a challenge, right? It's funny. When I was at Insight Express, I did a presentation for the team. And this, I guess, shows my age, but when I was first getting into research, we would do crosstabs. And I remember talking to the data processing individual, and she said that you can only have 80 columns of data points running across the top of the crosstab, and then you can have as many rows you want, but only 80 columns. And I was like, okay, that's funny. All right, then I'd give her my 80 columns. And you had to think men is 3 columns, MEN, or unless you did.
Well, it had to fit on a printout, right? I mean,
right, you had to fit on a printout. And then, years later, it wasn't until years later that I realized that the reason they use 80 columns is because market research is an industry that evolved from early days of computers. Punch cards were how you fed data. Like I would do a survey, punch some cards out, and feed that into a computer. That's how you counted results in a survey. Market researchers were some of the early innovators in the computer field, and the software had been written with 80 columns of punches that you could use. You couldn't go beyond that, and there are all these things that had been built into this software that had not evolved. And at the time, I guess the point of the conversation I was having with these folks is like, if I think about market research, we have a tendency to try not to evolve, to be afraid of evolution, because while we were not evolving our software and sticking to 80 columns, Oracle was being born. Like the relational database, like a completely different way of looking at processing and using data. And look what that turned into.
We're using Wincross, and
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I think there's like a lesson to be learned there. Like marketing research had this value it was delivering in counting and measuring things for companies. And a new technology came along that did a better job of like organizing, cataloging data for measuring and counting things. Now there's an entire industry around business analytics and stuff that we don't really call part of the industry, because
they try to, at least. So
yeah, like, well, we let it shut off, right? And it's now something different. We kind of try to encircle it and include it in the numbers, but I think that there's a risk of that happening. Like at the moment that we're in today, it's very easy to say, well, that all this synthetic stuff or all this stuff happening over here, that's kind of a different machine, different animal, and we can do that, but it's all we're doing is sort of reducing the scope of the problems we can solve on behalf of our clients.
That's a great point. I mean, you remember what CX, UX, all those things, that was just part of market research, right? My first job in research was running a customer satisfaction phone room, so a kitty room, and there was no this was something different. It was just that was just one of the things that you did within market research. So to your point, we've seen this kind of halving off of different things. Social media analytics, we had the opportunity to own that. We did not. We let that go off and do its own thing. And I think you're exactly right on the synthetic sample. I know the companies that I am working with that are building that. Well, so it's an interesting dynamic. The companies I'm working with building that aren't selling to research organizations.
Mm-hmm.
So, where they have the most traction is generally outside of the research organization. Now, we could argue it's because researchers think that it's less, lower quality or whatever the case may be. And it may be, although the folks that I'm working with, I don't think that's the case at all. So we've seen two things happening, this democratization of insights driven by technology across the board, right? And that's caused this kind of breaking off or fragmentation of the industry. But technology's enabled the product manager, the brand manager, the marketer, et cetera, to do these things in the way that makes sense for them across the board. So this decentralization and fragmentation. But that's perpetuating this overall kind of breakaway where the things we think of now as just market research has become the smaller and smaller component that is. I used to disagree with folks like Ray Pointer and even my partner Greg that the insights industry would go away and it would simply be a function. I can't debate them as much now. I think we are going down that path where what we think of as the industry is simply going to be subsumed into probably into just analytics overall, right? Data. And there will be functional roles that know how to address specific business issues, advertising measurement, advertising testing, new product concept testing. And maybe some organizations will keep that centralized, but most probably will not.
I think the way to look at it is when you look at every single successful I liked your analogy there. I think about like as the industry is an iceberg, and every single calving of a portion of the industry, whether it's UX or whether it's CX modality is a great example of that, or even BI analytics, things like that. Every time one of those things breaks off of the industry, it's doing so because it's solving a problem that I think we always fail to really truly recognize, which is usually because they're solving a problem of scale, right? What did Medallia do for CX? It let you put a code at the bottom of a receipt, from a grocery store for a feedback survey at scale across every single user who's ever been to that store, right?
And they use social media data as well, right?
Social media is same problem. Like, you want to understand what people are thinking. What did we do? We figure out how to do that at scale, right? And I think that is the thing that we always fail to recognize, is that sometimes scale is more important to businesses, or scale of data, scale of answers is more important to businesses than 100% of the quality question, right? So I think, because scale means you're applying data to more problems. If my choice is don't apply any data to this problem and make a guess, get a fantastic data set, but it will cost me, I got to build my own panel because nobody has enough of these people. It's going to cost me $1 million. Or I can take a middle path, which is like, all right, I can use some validation exercising, some synthetic, and everybody hates that word, but some sort of AI augmented approach using trained on real human data. Yeah, why not, right? If I can be confident in my decisions, because that's all these people do, right? That's all business are trying to do, is be confident in the decision. That all research is about decisions, right? I got to make the right decision. Should I go into this market or not? Should I launch this product or that product? Is my business headed in the right direction? All those are decision oriented things, and if I can use something to help me make better decisions at scale, then I'm going to do that. And I think we generally tend to get caught up in quality and all these other things. And I'm a huge proponent of quality, don't get me wrong, but I think you kind of need to look at the different other things people are considering. It's not always just 100% about quality.
Well, you lived through that at Kantar, right? When Zappy merged, right? And I'm sure you remember the conversation from Stan Unilever at that point of something to the effect, if I can get 80% of the quality at 20% of the time, and 20% of the cost, then why the hell would I not do that, right? And think about the automation play. And of course, you guys were partnering with Zappy, and I know that you're internally going, oh crap, especially Noah Brown, the cannibalization of revenue. But to your point, you saw clearly that's what was going to happen. There was no way, once that genie was out of the bottle, there was no way to put it back in. So that driver for to make the business decision with good enough information based upon what the business decision was, more tactical, my rule of thumb, see if you agree, the more tactical it is, the more good enough is good enough. Yeah. The more strategic it is, then the less good enough is good enough, right? That we need more accuracy.
Yeah. I think the thing about solving the scale problem is you do exactly what you said. Like, you bring down the cost per decision, right? So testing an ad doesn't cost me $25,000. It costs me $5,000, and now it's down even way lower than that. Like, so there's a declining cost of decisioning, but what you're trading off is people are now applying it to more decisions. So you actually, a lot of companies that go down that road end up eventually becoming bigger anyway, because each individual decision doesn't cost a lot, but there's more decisions that are being actioned through there. I think the other lens on this that we need to keep in mind, and if I think about the marketing side of the equation now, advertising and what have you, that industry is being massively affected right now by two different things, by agentic workflows and generative AI. Like, hello, where is AI having an impact? Where's the first place it's having an impact in creative development? And so we now have companies that are not having to contend with, hey, I've got 100 ads to test for my brand this year. They got thousands of ads to test, thousands of variants to test.
And you can test
do that.
live A/B. I mean, effectively at scale. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, the world is definitely changing that regard. And I do think, understanding like the scale needs. But to your point, I think you said this earlier in the conversation. The question is, if I'm at a company, an established market research firm today, and I look around and say, I do agree, like this scale problem. If we can figure out how to take what we do and make it scale with AI, that'd be great. It's like I would ask the question, like, is that something you guys are prepared or able to do? Like, or is your entire team just used to doing it the non-scaled way? That
Right.
understands why I have customers that are asking for that. Like that's your whole life and your livelihood. If that's the case, like this is when you need to start considering, like, how do I do this in a creative way from a business structure perspective? How do I like spin something off, or how do I make a particular investment in a partner to help me get there? Because one of the things we have to contend with, this is what I wrote about most recently, is what Clayton Christensen says in the Innovator's Dilemma is like the people who are stewards of your business today are the ones that are keeping you from innovating. Like you end up being a victim of your own success.
And that's a tough one. So we're I want to be conscious of. Well, I'm not conscious about your time. We'll go on for hours, but I do want to be conscious of the listeners, right? So, one day I aspire to do like a Rogan type conversation. We just talk till we're done talking, but I don't think we're quite there yet. So I want to kind of take a couple specific areas. And hell, now I just lost my train of thought. The Innovator's Dilemma. So we have seen massive changeover recently at for many of the large companies in the space, right? A change in leadership across the board. And I always have two thoughts with that. The first is, well, you're getting ready for sale, because they're always getting ready for sale at some point, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's necessarily the case in this. And here's my second thought usually is somebody's got to right the ship and guide them through transformation. And I think so now I think it's a sequence. They're trying to find the perfect person to right the ship and guide them through transformation to get them ready for a transaction down the road. And because there's a profile to all the folks we see being hired right now that just screams business transformation, right? They're all from one of the big consultancies, or they're pulling from outside the insight space, from technology. And I don't know that people pay enough attention to those things, that those are strong signals on where the industry is going. You were part of Kantar, right? I've only been an outsider. Am I reading that right? Is that what you think when you see these things happening?
Yeah. I mean, look, but when I think about Kantar specifically, but big research in general, when I think about Kantar specifically, they're obviously owned by private equity. Private equity doesn't like to hold things longer than 5-6 years on the outside, and it's been that time frame. So they need some level of exit. I don't think anyone's banking on a massive multi-billion-dollar IPO at this point, and so they
maybe a numerator, but
I think they're looking at a different type of transformation now, and that sort of you read the tea leaves and new hires, and that seems to be the direction of travel. But and it's good to see the desire for transformation. I mean, just bringing in fresh perspective is a huge deal. I think the challenge that the established players, the bigger companies, have is being handcuffed to what you're already doing today, and how do you manage transformation. And look, I think both companies are hiring new people to try to do this, and they both need people who are good stewards of businesses to come in and say, hey, let's make sure the P&L works. Let's make sure that we're converting enough of our revenue into profit, that we're paying down debt, we're doing all the things we need to do from a P&L perspective. And if we do that really well, we're going to create cash, and that cash goes back into the business to help us invest in transformation. And I do think that they're making the right moves in that regard. The fundamental question that I think they'll have to figure out is, can they do that fast enough? Like, can you create that free cash flow that's going to just reinvest in the business to double down fast enough? And can you do that fast enough with the pressure coming from up top, from a board level, saying, hey, we need to see, in the case of Kantar, we need to see an exit, or we need to see the next step. Actually, the irony of it is that, it may end up being that if they can position themselves well enough, whether you look at, a Kantar or an Ipsos or Tuluna or someone like that, they actually do present a relatively attractive target for, someone who's like more of an AI native company, right? To look at and say, hey, this is a great way for us to augment our data collection, data curation process.
Yep.
But they need to get to a certain level of transformation to do that, to make that, attractive enough.
Yep.
For those companies.
So as we record this in early November, because it's probably not going to publish till January, this week, GWI announced their integration with Anthropic.
Yeah.
Feeding the data. A few weeks ago, Morning Consult announced their APIs. A little before that, we had Cint now integrating into Snowflake to feed that way. I continue to hear more than rumors that the AI companies are circling around a few different type of companies in our space, particularly panels. So I think you're right. There's evidence that's there that we can see. There's noise out there or whispers that we can't see yet, but I believe is happening because it just makes sense for that to occur. So,
and I think even Pure Spectrum got into the game. Phil.
Yes.
Like the
that's yes. Yep.
Training data features so I do think that look, there's too many companies to all get like a crazy great exit to one of those AI firms, but I do think that is like, if I'm, a senior executive at one of those firms, that's maybe one of the things, and I'm being told I need to find an exit, that's one of the locations that I would look, because I do think that there's value in what research companies create. It's not going away anytime soon. And, one of the things, this is one of my axes to grind. One of the things I think we've kind of been unable to do more recently as an industry is invest in foundational research. Where's all the foundational research coming from in the last 10 years? It's been from the likes of Google or from academics, but more increasingly from people like OpenAI and Anthropic and things like that, companies like that. And I do think they're all working on models to improve and to increasingly throw out more research into the ecosystem. That pairs very well with companies that try to understand humans, right? And so if you can take these companies that are trying to build like a scientific revolution with their models and pair that together with people who are trying to be the scientists of understanding how humans work, there's an interesting sort of value proposition that gets created there by having that connection to the consumer, particularly from a panel side, and then having a connection to trying to build models that understand how humans work. And so I'm really optimistic about the opportunities there.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Meta always had an incredibly large internal research organization, right? And we're doing very progressive things. And of course, now they've funneled that into AI, although, you don't hear Llama mentioned at the same level as some of the other models, but I'm not counting them out for that very reason, right? They have access to immense amounts. Same thing with Grok. The people get, whatever irritated with Elon, but dude, he bought the largest data collection platform one of the largest data collection platforms in the world for the pure purpose of getting training data. So,
yeah,
that wasn't a bad decision, right?
No, not at all.
So I am, to your point, I'm optimistic as well that we'll see good things come out of that. And obviously, I still have a hard time seeing exactly. Anthropic is such a nebulous. They're not nebulous isn't the right term. They seem to be engaged with everybody, it's clear what their business goal is. Their business goal is to be the enterprise infrastructure for AI. That, and I would say they probably have already won that battle, is my guess. So I think that is where they will wind up. Where so they'll be Google, right, and OpenAI will be Apple. So
Yeah.
the if OpenAI can survive their instability and internal political challenges and external legal challenges, right, that they're going through. But it's obvious where those go overall. Yeah, I don't even know where I was going with all that. Other than I agree that the rightful the logical path forward is for the AI companies to get much closer to the insights providers because they need access to the data. And it is their job to learn how to unlock value creation from data. So I fully expect to see some interesting things like that happen.
Yeah, I think. Well, I think one of the next battleground. You mentioned this earlier. I think the next battleground for the insights to figure out is, like insights becoming a function, not a department, right? And these companies that are now coming into the space, they're not going to the insights department. That's where all of the established players have their contacts, right? You go. I've always said, like, the insights team, when you have a question in an organization, you go to the insights team. The insights team says, here's the syndicated data we have. This is what it says. Here's what we've done in the past. Or your third answer is, let me go talk to one of my vendors. That's where, the vendors that exist in the market today have done really well. I think one of the things that's novel that we're seeing is new vendors coming in that are coming in above that team. They're going direct to the brand manager, to the product manager, to the UX designer. Like they're circumventing an established process. And I think the ground upon which insights will have to wage its battle in the future will not be, fighting your way in the door of the insights team. It'll be trying to stay relevant amongst a larger cohort of potential buyers that are upstream of the insights team, that don't think like insights people. They don't think through operational lens. They don't think with like, what's my confidence interval going to be on this study? They're just thinking about solving business problems. And I think that's going to be the next territory. And there's going to be some companies that do, and a lot of these enterprise plays, whether it's someone like an Anthropic or Gemini or OpenAI or even Microsoft with their platform, wouldn't count them out, are really trying to go front and center with everybody else in the organization. And they may end up being the gateway to, to getting access to the insights. So I do think, I think what GWI did was really smart, finding, and they're leveraging, what Anthropic created in the first place, the MCP platform, to make it happen. Which they'll also, because MCP was adopted by OpenAI and has been adopted by Google, it makes it interoperable with those platforms as well. It's a really great kind of move, and I hope to see more of that in the industry. I think we have a great opportunity to start to become more interoperable with the ecosystems that are being created in these companies. And the more we do that, the more we engage on some of these forward-leaning technologies that are maybe a little unproven, but worth the risk, I think.
Absolutely.
The more we can continue to solidify the value that insights can bring.
Oh, Mark, you've been incredibly generous with your time, and we will have more of these conversations, both privately and publicly. But is there? So we're recording this in November of 2025. If you delivered one urgent message to or one key takeaway, right, that you want folks to hear and to think through, that will likely impact the next 6 months, 12 months of the business, what would that be? Just try and distill your wisdom into a nugget, my friend.
And that's hard to do, but I mean, I'll try my best here. I think insights is in a really good place as far as the value that it brings, but we have to be careful we don't repeat what we've done in the past, which is to ignore what's happening around us.
Mhm.
Sometimes, the best thing to do is to find ways to lean in on something that you don't understand. And it's okay to say, I don't understand everything about AI. I wouldn't call myself, a guru on that front, but leaning in is part and parcel of what we need to do. And so I think businesses need to find ways to get in there and experiment and not get hung up in our own bureaucracy.
Yeah.
And so my one piece of advice was try to find a way to focus on these ideas and to share these ideas, right? Like, I think one of the things most people have an aversion to is like sharing ideas that they've got early on, and ideas are like they're like plants. They grow in the sunlight.
Yep.
If you keep them locked in a closet with no sun and no sustenance, they die.
Yep.
And when I say share, I don't mean just going to your existing clients. Find different people and talk to them like, hey, I'm in this. This is what I do. I do, qualitative, or I do quantitative. And find someone else, someone who's not a customer, and share your ideas and what your business does. Because I think you discover new things in those conversations.
Yep.
The thing to remember is this stuff is going to be adopted first, not by our traditional clients. It's going to be adopted by people who are cutting different types of paths through the industry. And if we can take what we do today and share that more broadly with a larger group of potential acquirers, kind of like what GWI did that got them into Anthropic, you're going to see more success. And so my biggest thing is like, it might not understand it all, but there's an opportunity to really share what we do and the value we bring as an insights industry, and most likely uncover some unexplored parts of the industry and some opportunities worth pursuing.
Yep. Well, you just played good cop. I'll play bad cop.
Sure.
Because the alternative there is to be the frog in the boiling water.
Yeah.
And that will happen. There are people that, through whatever reason, will not make it through this transformation. And we've seen it before.
Yeah.
So
yeah, definitely seen it before.
Yeah. But I encourage everybody. I think everybody who listens to this show, they're the folks that are thinking ahead. So I don't think we'll have any frogs around here. I think that
definitely not. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that
everybody can take this as maybe a prompt to go out and find a non-customer and describe your business to them, and see how AI applied to that can help. And maybe it'll open a door.
100%. 100%. Mark, thank you. Really, I knew this would be a fun conversation, and at least in our idea of fun, I think.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Hopefully others will enjoy it as well. Where can people find you?
You can find me at darkmatter.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Marc Ryan, Mark with a C. If you want to check out my Substack, it's Gray Matter Unloaded. It's kind of where I unload my brain, and graymatterunloaded.com, and you'll find me there as well.
Yeah. And on that note, it is worth it. I will publicly apologize. I have not subscribed from a paying standpoint, because if people have not discovered Substack yet, my God, I mean, I subscribe to like 100 Substacks, so I literally can't afford to pay everybody.
Yeah. I'm in the same boat, right?
Yeah. Which is a real flaw with the Substack model, by the way, at least for people like me. If somebody from Substack is listening, I have some ideas on how to change that. But if I wasn't already at my limit of paid subscriptions, my friend, you would be at the top of the list of folks.
Well, I'll have to say right now it's free for all. I haven't enabled payments yet on my Substack, so.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, good.
Guilt free for anybody who wants to listen in.
All right, good. I didn't recall whether I saw that or not, but fair enough. Then now I don't feel bad. So never mind. I'm not going to apologize to you. But it's definitely worth subscribing, guys. It's always brilliant stuff. All right.
The plug. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you so much. Thank you to our listeners for giving Mark an excuse to do this in a more structured way than we probably would normally do it. And thank you to our sponsors and producers. And that is it for this edition of the CEO series. We'll be back with the new one soon. Bye-bye.